to you, tabletop enthusiast. I'm Celine, brand and community manager for Game on Tabletop, the crowdfunding platform for gamers by gamers. I am back with a new video for our series where we interview different actors from the board game and the crowdfunding industries. Today, our special guest is Stefan, who is a project manager at Panda Games Manufacturing. Hi, Stefan. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for being here with me today.
My pleasure.
So first, can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you ended up working for Panda?
To start, I am a gamer. I hope it's obvious from the shelf of games that I enjoy behind me. Yeah, I started playing games quite early on. Before college, I started playing Magic the Gathering a lot and discovered a lot of modern board games starting in college. My background is in academia. I was a few years into a PhD program before realizing it's really not the path I wanted to take in my life. And shortly after I left that program, I saw an advertisement on Board Game Geek for a position at Panda. And I was lucky enough to get that position and been with the company for about 5.5 years.
Can you tell me more about Panda and what they do in a nutshell?
So Panda is a board game manufacturer. We specialize in customization of components and customer service. In terms of customization, we own our factory in Shenzhen, China. We can make pretty much anything that you can envision wanting in a board game. So that runs the gamut from standard cards to custom plastic to more interesting things, enamel pins, cloth mats, anything like that.
Yeah, I watched the video on the homepage of Panda's website where we see how the different elements of a game are made. And to me, and I know to a lot of people, manufacturing isn't necessarily the funniest or the sexiest part of the game creation. But this video actually did kind of change my mind. It was really interesting to see how everything is made with all the different machines.
Yeah, I would absolutely encourage anyone who is publishing to look up some of the steps that go into manufacturing. It really is a fascinating side to it.
What is your role as a project manager?
So, in a nutshell, my role as a project manager is to act as a liaison between our factory and my clients. So if they have any questions or need any type of assistance with any step of the process, I'm there to help walk them through that. So that includes, sampling, design verification, advice for crowdfunding, shipping arrangements, all of that.
Can you tell me more about the process of Panda with new creators?
So generally, the process of helping out any new creator, new clients would be to request a quote from us. Generally, if they have a good idea of what their game is, submit that to us. We can get some pricing and get started talking about the different components. Unfortunately, because the situation right now, this being September 2021, there's a lot of difficulties. It's a very busy time, and we are focusing more on our current clients and providing as much support as we can for them. So what I would say is that we have a lot of free tools and guidebooks located on our website that are available for anyone to use, regardless of whether or not we're working with them. I would encourage everyone to check those out. They include things like a template generator, pre-flight profile for design verification, crowdfunding guidebook, and so on. Panda started as a manufacturer for small independent publishers, and we want to maintain our support of those, even though we're not taking on those new clients. When we do start taking on new clients, it's very useful when those clients have graphic designers, they have a web presence, so a website, a BGG page, or a little bit of a following from people excited about their game. Looking into fulfillment and distribution partners is great to do early as well, and of course, play test your game so we can help with that. I will say that once we start working with clients, they don't necessarily have to have a vast industry knowledge to be successful with Panda, because we are walking them through every step of the process. We can provide support for any questions that they might have.
Okay, so you can actually help them on other subjects, not just the manufacturing process.
Not just production. Yeah, we're happy to talk about anything industry related.
I was wondering, does the game have to be 100% finished to get a quote or to start working with you? And in which way can you help with that?
It does not have to be 100% finished. It's great if we get an initial quote request for something that's, let's say, 80% done. That gives us a great opportunity to price things out to start with. And then we can provide some value in that last 20%, maybe make suggestions on how to deluxify the components for stretch goals, as an example, or to cut back if the creator wants to budget a little bit more and get the price down. We can make recommendations on all of that. A lot of my time as a project manager is spent in that last 20% and helping my clients make sure they get exactly the game they want for the price that they want.
And how important is it for you to have a prototype in order to make the best suggestions for the game and for the quotes?
In general, a prototype is not necessary. As long as we know the size and the materials for the components, we can price it out. Art is not important for that, for example. However, the one part where at least seeing a concept drawing or a 3D file or something like that would be helpful is custom plastics, and to a lesser degree, something like custom metals. The pricing changes a lot depending on the design. So we do need to have some idea of what you're looking at. If you don't have that stuff yet, that's okay. Just look up examples from other published games and say, I want minis that look like such and such game. That's useful as well.
If you run a crowdfunding campaign in English, should you already be thinking about other language editions? And what are the options to make it more cost-effective when you want to produce a game in different languages?
The short answer is yes. You should consider other languages, but the long answer is it's not always correct to do so, especially if this is a first project or even a first printing of a particular game. Additional languages can be difficult because you either need to print them as a separate print run, which will increase the cost of the units, or you need to apply a plate change, which is actually a change of the physical printing plates that are used for production. And both of those are expensive. So if you have small quantities of any additional languages past the first, it can add up and cut into your budget. Oftentimes it is correct to wait until a second printing when you have a little bit more support for the game. You can find more partners, maybe have a larger print run to make those languages make more sense.
Yeah, and what I know other creators might do in that case is they print a rule book with all the languages they want the game to be available in, and then the rest of the elements from the game, for example the cards, have little to no text, so then it's easier to be used in other languages.
Yes, actually, that's a great point. So I mentioned that the plate changes are something that adds cost to the game, but if the creators, for example, minimize the number of different components that require that plate change, it brings the cost way down. So if it's just the rulebook that's changing, maybe the box back as opposed to the box front and back, all of that can reduce those costs and make it more effective, or efficient, I should say, to include those additional languages.
In general, what are the different elements that can make the cost of the production increase or decrease?
Everything in the game is going to have an impact on cost. What I would say the elements that are going to have the largest impact are things like, we mentioned the custom plastics. The more different designs that you have, the more miniatures that you have in different colors and things, that really adds to the game, especially the mold cost of those units. Making sure that your cards fit on single printing sheets or multiples of a printing sheet. So, for example, if you want poker-sized cards, then you would want them to be able to fit 54 to a sheet. So if you have 54 cards in your game or 108 cards in the game, that's going to be the most cost effective. Things like the box size, making sure that it fits correctly to the space that you have and that you need. Consider a custom insert if you want to fill in additional space there, but also the order quantity. And that's sort of the big one. Any components in the game, but particularly printed components, have an economy of scales. The higher the quantity is, the lower the per unit cost. So the more you can print, the better.
What does the creator need to know in terms of standard sizes for boxes or for cards or tooling, molding?
Standard card sizes are ideal. So you should look to do those. I believe our design guidebook has a list of some of the most common ones as well, but we have custom die cut molds for many different sizes. There isn't really a standard box size. You'll probably want to keep it roughly to an industry standard, nothing too crazy. That just, it may increase costs if it's not an effective use of the printed material. Tooling for those who are not aware, is a one-time fee that pays for things like molds and die cut patterns. And by a one-time fee, I mean that in future print runs of the game, if it uses the same molds or die cuts, there's no fee for that again. Initially, if you have multiple different plastic designs, those all need to be molded. So the more designs, the more molds you have, the higher that cost. So minimizing those is a great consideration. The other thing is minimizing die cut patterns. So die cut patterns are the actual physical punches that are used on things like punch boards. If you have multiple different token shapes, squares and circles, for example, don't put those on different punch board sheets. Share a punch board sheet, because then we only need one die cut pattern to apply to multiple sheets.
We know that there are many elements that can cause delays in production, for example, COVID, but also Chinese New Year. Is there maybe a way to avoid those delays, maybe predict the period of time to avoid things to prepare in advance?
For things like COVID, it would be so excellent if there are ways to predict or avoid. For things like Chinese New Year and conventions, actually, there are ways you can work around them. This industry is busy year-round, but particularly production and shipping right before a major convention like Gen Con or Essen, as well as leading up to Chinese New Year, which is the end of January and early February. Those are the busiest times that should be avoided. If you plan to do mass production or shipping sort of early spring, that's generally the least busy time. What I would say is check out the design requirements for files ahead of time, so that part of the process can go more quickly. Get sampling done early on if some of your components are in a final form, so that if maybe you're waiting for a Kickstarter campaign to end, or you're waiting for your graphic designer to wrap up on some files, you have other things that have already happened to make the process go a little bit quicker when you're ready.
What are the things that are different with crafting campaigns when it comes to production compared to games that directly go in retail?
Most of the time, the main difference is twofold. One of them is related to a schedule. When we talk to folks who are crowdfunding, we need to make sure that they understand what their schedule for production is. It's great if they budget plenty of time and communicate that to their backers so that we don't have to rush anything. But if they have promised a very specific timeline, we need to figure out how to make that work or do our best to make it work. And the other is related to the stretch goals and sort of the different tiers of pledging. So oftentimes when you go through crowdfunding, there's many different versions of a game, or there are many different options that may be applied at different times. So the quoting process gets more complicated, and that's part of the support that we can provide is walking through those different things, maybe advising which of those different component upgrades, for example, can be attached to different stretch goal levels.
Do you have an advice to share on production for creators who would like to crowdfund their game?
Yes. Quote early, quote often whenever you feel there are main changes. Make sure that you budget for all different levels of your campaign. So if you're wildly successful, if you want to add different stretch goals and things, make sure you understand how that's going to impact manufacturing, but also how it will affect shipping. Shipping, especially now, is it's actually a rather complicated aspect of production. You want to make sure you budget plenty of time in your schedule, but also budget plenty of money to make sure that these games can be delivered to wherever your backers might be.
And the last question, is there maybe something that we haven't talked about yet and that you would like to add?
I would like to just quickly speak on setting up your game, especially if you're doing crowdfunding, and say, consider the audience that you're looking for your game. Make sure that the age range that you list, if you're under, generally it's under the age of 14 marked on your box, there may be a necessity for safety testing because it will be deemed a toy. So consider things like that. It's a big industry, but there's lots of competition. So figuring out the components in your game, the types of mechanisms in your game, and just the style of gameplay, trying to carve out your own niche for that is very important.
Okay, and if people would like to get quotes from Panda Games Manufacturing and work with you, where can they find you?
So we are at pandagm.com is our website. That's where all the tools. Normally the quote form would be as well. We are going to have a presence at any major convention. Most of the time we're going to have a booth, but if not, we'll have some people wandering around. So there's always an opportunity to meet up with someone and chat. Also wanted to say thanks for reaching out and setting this up. Nice chatting with you. Always happy to do this.
Well, thank you for being with us today. Bye-bye! And that's it for today's video on board game manufacturing. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to follow our crafting adventures. Make sure to check out GameOnTabletop.com to discover great tabletop crafting companies. See you next time for our next video. Until then, bye-bye!